Hey, what's up guys? Node Investor here. Can't believe it's already the end of December as we wrap up 2019 here. Going to bring a quick update on some of this market action. We'll be looking at the price of Bitcoin, of course, following that big move, a little bit of a tight consolidation that we are seeing here on the charts, looking at the bigger picture as well, sharing my thoughts as we head into 2020, what I'm thinking about the crypto markets and some trading opportunities that may be out there. We'll be looking at the market cap dominance. But before any of that, I just want to take a quick minute and say thank you. I just want to say how appreciative I am of you guys subscribing. Many of you guys have been viewers of this channel for a long time. It's almost hard to believe that we started this in early 2017. That feels like a lifetime ago, and it has been another wild ride here in the crypto space. As usual, 2019 turned out to be a pretty wild year in many regards. We saw a pretty massive spike in the price of Bitcoin in the first half of the year, followed by pretty deep losses in the second half of the year, and many altcoins have continued to lose valuation, as many of you are aware, and a lot of them are right where they were this time last year. Some of them are even lower, but there have certainly been some big moves this year, some big up-and-comers, and I'm going to wrap up 2020 with a kind of year-end video here next week. Today we'll just focus on some of the near-term action, some of the price action we're seeing here in the recent days. But I just wanted to take that moment and just say thank you and appreciate all of you guys, the comments, the chats, the people in the Slack community, and the supporters of the Node Insider. So thank you all. Let's get to it. So looking at the market cap dominance first here, BTC dominance is still relatively high, and it's it's always important to remember that the entire cryptocurrency space, is predominantly Bitcoin. And when you think about it, look at the market dominance here is still in the high 60s%. And the next biggest one, Ethereum, is a far distant second, right around 8% dominance, followed by XRP and then Bitcoin Cash, Litecoin. Not a lot of change in the top 10 names this year in terms of market cap dominance, just kind of continued with the status quo. There's been some in and outs of that group, but not a lot of change for the most part. BTC dominance just continues to be up there. We saw a big climb in dominance this year as Bitcoin had that massive rally, and most alts just continue to lose ground versus BTC. We have seen that dominance pull in here in recent months, and there have been, I would say, like some big bases being established on some of those altcoins, but we have not seen them bounce off of that low yet, but potentially a long time low is being set. Of course, going into next year, the big event that I'm going to be watching is the Bitcoin halving, which will be happening in that May timeframe. And it's a big fundamental change. Ultimately, long term, I think it's a bullish thing for Bitcoin and crypto. Has that been priced in near term? Possibly, but we have seen a pretty good pullback at this point. So it's going to be interesting to see how price reacts going into that May timeframe here. And we can see the BTC dominance here this year has been pretty wild after peaking near 140 billion in the month of June with that big surge in BTC. It's pretty much just been a straight decline, slow grind lower, and here we are now in the $60 billion range. So it's given back quite a bit here over the last 6 months. Let's look at the chart here. So going to BTC, it's important to remember the big picture, of course. Just like the Bitcoin market or the crypto market cap, Bitcoin continues to have a broader macro downtrend. Now this is the daily chart going back to about late October after that big 40% 2-day move that we saw off the lows. But even before that, it had already been in a little bit of a broader downtrend, and that continues to be the case. Now, the fact that we have seen a pretty big reversal here this week, on Wednesday we saw a massive bullish engulfing candle on the daily. Now we've seen those in the past year, but that was a pretty good reversal off the low after undercutting, very slightly undercutting that November 25th low around 6,500. We saw a big spike higher. Now we're going to be paying attention for some potential follow through to the upside. If I zoom out and look at that weekly chart, that was also at a big long time support level around that mid 6Ks. Now this is where I don't want to see BTC get much lower than. Ideally, this is where you want the bulls to start stepping in, start some accumulation here on the higher time frames. This is the weekly chart, but that's a key level. If it starts to break below that and start getting into the 5Ks and even the lower 5Ks, then the big picture really starts to look like a big top. Looks like this was a lower high in the macro, and you'd be testing that lower 4Ks at that point. Don't want to see that. Of course, there is that big symmetrical pattern that is forming heading into the halving, and so that's something to be keeping an eye on. That lower trend line kind of corresponds with that 5K zone as well, so something to be watching here in the very big picture. Again, this is the weekly chart with that halving showing up here right around where that 2/3 of that pattern apex would be. So ideally we'd like to see some accumulation going into the new year, some pause, some support showing up in that 6Ks range, which we've seen again, and then ultimately getting back over that 9K level would be a significant move to the upside. Let's zoom in here a little bit and go to the near-term action, because when it comes to trading, most of the time I'm just looking at the shorter time frames like the 4-hour chart. I use the daily as a big picture to kind of set the broader pattern, the broader trend, but as far as the execution side of things, the ins and outs, 4-hour, sometimes the 1-hour view is what I'll use to make those calls. And lately, until Wednesday, it's been mostly short side. I was short the last couple of weeks, in and out several times, and finally got out. Now, I did front run this a little bit. It was starting to buy here into the dip, and luckily I didn't get shaken out here on this move, so I was able to capitalize on that quick move on Wednesday. And now I'm looking for some more upside testing. I'm going to be watching two big numbers, and these are the same numbers I've been watching here as of late. That 7,600 level on the upside is your first major resistance level, and then above that, 7,800. We're still quite a ways from that here, but if this rally continues, if we can continue to hold support here, then I'm going to be looking for another test of that 7,500 to 7,600 level before a potential pause. So that's first next major resistance, and then 7,800 on the way up. Now on the downside, it's a pretty tight range. If we zoom in here even more and look at that 1-hour view, after that big move here, it's just been sitting very tight, very quiet here. As we know, these tight ranges, consolidations, they don't last for very long, so be on the lookout for a potential move out of this range here this weekend. And I'm watching that 7,200 number, which is right where it's at right now. If it can start holding above that, then I'm looking for that continuation move to the upside. On the downside, even going down to about 7K still would be okay. Below that, if it starts to really dip below that, then that's going to look like a failed move. And at that point, the broader picture continues to remain in place with the dominant trend being downward. So that's something I'm watching on the BTC side of things. Many of you guys know we did launch the new Node Insiders site here this week. You can get more information on that here. I'll put a link to this site where you can get some more information. But going to the site here, the BTC trading bot status did go flat following that big reversal off the lows this week, and it remains flat here. And it was previously short for about a week or so going into that dip, and so that's something I'm watching here. It is flat now. Based on the trading strategy, the daily strategy won't go long for some time because of some other filters that I use, but the 4-hour strategy has the potential to switch over to long if that upside testing continues going into 7,600. So that's something I'm watching out for. On the flip side, if we lose 7K, would not surprise me to see that bot trading strategy flip back to short. So something I'm going to be watching here. That's one thing I'm going to focus on kind of going into 2020. I'll be showing more of that, more how I developed the strategies, the indicators that I use, and maybe do a little bit of content. I know last year I started the trading series. I may kick that back up here after the new year. Maybe I'll put a little twist on it and see if I can compete against my own bot, see if I can beat the bot. Man versus machine type of trading. So we'll see how that goes. I've got some ideas. I'll continue to focus on the site here, but I'll be back to my regular routine now that we've launched this. It was a lot of work for the last 2 months, and so that's why I slowed down a little bit on the videos and some of the online activity, but not to say that I wasn't busy. But now that this is kind of past us, I'll continue to focus on more of regular routine and posting updates on the markets and all that, but there's a lot more features that I want to continue to add to this, so we'll continue to work on this and make this better for you guys here. All right, so a few more other things here. Let's look at a few other names that are on the list. There's been a few movers here, even with the broader market seeing some bearish action. Atom continues to be one of the stronger names in the market, just a very steady uptrend since September, just continues to climb higher. I would caution, however, there are some slight divergences starting to show up here. You can see that on the RSI, slightly on the MACD, not as much, but the trend is your friend. As long as that continues, something to keep an eye on here. I'd be watching these moving averages. Let me clear that line there. If it starts to break below that 22 daily EMA, at that point, that's probably a cautionary signal. And if I was long, I'd be looking to start preserving some of those gains, tightening the stops, that sort of thing. We are seeing some volume spiking near the highs, which is typical of distribution signs. So just something to be watching. On the 4-hour view, if you zoom in there, it's kind of just flat consolidation, a little bit more of a neutral view, but big picture, still very one of the strong names out there. XTZ, I mentioned how this one looked toppy to me a few days ago, and it is starting to pull back, rolling over. I did find some support right around that 22-day EMA, but the next big level down on the BTC pair is around that 1900 level, and then below that, in and around that 1600, 1670 level is what I'd be watching. But the signs were there. We had a big run. It was one of the stronger leaders, and then here near the highs, volume started to spike. A lot of distribution started to show up, more selling volume than buying volume, and it could have gone either way. We could have been setting up for a breakout, but once it lost that support level around 2300, that was kind of confirmation for me, showing that the downside or the upside trend had paused, and now we're going to see some downside testing. Of course, if it gets back above that 2400 level, then that just negates all of that. But for now, looks like we're watching this support to see if that can hold on that BTC pair. A few other names that have been showing some momentum lately. I'm watching Mana. I've been showing this one up here the last couple of weeks. It popped on the radar when it came off the lows. It's been hitting the trending list here, in and out of the list here for the last week and a half, and just continues to march higher, show some good strength. But if you zoom out and look at the big picture, a lot of alts are doing this after a big drop here, a big macro picture view for the last several months. I mean, going back August, September, many of these names are starting to put in this long, flat bases here near the lows. So it's going to be interesting to watch if some of these can start breaking to the upside and breaking out of those lows. Another one is THETA, right? And I'm just going through some of the names that are on the radar right now, but THETA edging out of resistance here, long time resistance. Again, this goes back to August here where it attempted it, back in October it attempted it, and here most recently finally cracking to the upside. And so I'm watching some of those, and there's a lot of them that are forming that big picture, but it's something to watch as we head into the new year. The alts this year, especially over the last 6 months, have just been really hammered in terms of valuations versus Bitcoin, and it's been the great devaluation in many of the alts. I know just from the sentiment out there, it's very bearish in terms of, you know, the optimism people have for the crypto space. It's just not quite what it used to be. There's that loss of the hope and the anticipation that some of these projects are not to be really big things, but we're starting to see some potential bases being formed. You're not seeing the big mainstream talk of Bitcoin and Ethereum like you used to. Certainly, if you're following crypto Twitter, there's always a lot happening, and if you're looking at the YouTube channels online, I mean, there's certainly a lot going on in the crypto space, continues to build out. But from a public sentiment perspective, clearly there's been a big drop in the interest. If you look at the Google Trends for Bitcoin and cryptocurrency, they absolutely line up with that, and they have just seen a big drop down over the last year and a half. And here's the price of Ethereum going back for the last year, and it's been quite the ride. Like many of these alts, big move up in the first 6 months, and then just kind of grinding its way lower since June here, hitting that $128 mark right now. First big level on the way up I'd be watching. If it can first get above these moving averages, they're declining lower, but if it can get back above that, first number is that 140 level, then above that, getting over this 150s, 160 mark would be a significant move, because that's your next major resistance, which was support on the way down and finally cracked and has just been drifting lower since then. A few other names that I want to point out real quick here. We looked at THETA, some of the other ones that were on the radar this week. Tomo has just continued to be marching higher, showing good relative strength versus BTC. Ethereum Classic, not a name I like to really trade too much, but Ethereum Classic showing some relative strength today here. Zooming into that 4-hour view, you can see the last couple candles have been spiking, but there's been a lot of rotation as of late. You'll see some names very strong, then they get weak. Matic still trying to recover off that big drop. If you zoom in here, it looks like a big move on the percentage basis here in the last day or so, but big picture, I mean, this is just a big oversold bounce right at the 10 EMA on the daily. So still pretty much technically broken after that massive move to the downside. If we go back to the alerts page here and flip over to the bot status page, this is the trading bot status for each of the altcoins relative to Bitcoin. And this is just covering some of the top tier names. And you can see here just across the board, overall still very much weak versus Bitcoin. Bitcoin continues to outperform most of these alts. There's a few standouts here. Of course, we saw Atom. We've seen some, the names Tezos and all that, but the trading bot for the most part is either flat or short most of these names, both on the 4-hour and the daily time frames. And that just kind of paints a picture overall. Altcoins just continue to grind lower versus Bitcoin, especially in the big cap land. Some of the small cap and the mid cap names, we've seen some pretty nice percentage moves to the upside, but in the big cap space, they're just not holding up relative to Bitcoin. And that's been the picture as of late. So that's going to be it for today, guys. Just want to wish everyone a happy holiday season. I will be taking a couple of days off going into next week, but I'll be back here at the end of the week next week, kind of heading into New Year's with some more updates. I'll be back online. Just want to wish everyone happy holidays. Enjoy your time. Enjoy your weekend. Until next time, take care, everyone.